Hello from your favorite Grasslands PR team. This week we're back with another reason why these overlooked and underappreciated ecosystems are objectively the best biome. I'm Rachel.
I'm Alan.
And I'm Nicole.
Hey, Nicole.
Hey, today we're talking about something very near and dear to my heart that basically no one cares about.
Oh. Is it bees again?
Ow!
No, like,
ow!
You know, the regular sort of bees. The ones that are, all over the place and aren't honeys.
My heart. I've been slain. No, it's something that people care about way less than bees.
Oh, no. That's fair.
It's crayfish.
Did you just hold up a reference textbook of crayfish, Nicole?
Yeah.
Nicole.
Yeah, she did. She very dramatically revealed it to us and to you now.
Yes.
Secondhand.
The Crayfishes of Missouri by William Flegger.
Okay.
Maybe.
Okay.
Maybe that's how you say his name. I'm so sorry. This man is still alive. Is probably upset that I butchered his last name, and I'm really sorry. But
I think he's probably pumped we're talking about crayfish.
probably.
Yeah.
He's getting name dropped in a podcast about the thing he loves enough to write a book on.
Yeah, you're so right. But this was produced by the Missouri Conservation Department. They have so much information on crayfish in this book on their website. Just so good.
Okay.
They're one of the only places you can find any information about crayfish online.
In a ecological context?
Yeah.
Because there's a lot in a culinary context.
This is very true.
Yeah.
And we will talk about that because it's
Oh, yes.
pretty insane how many crayfish people eat every year.
Okay.
Do you want to guess?
I have never thought about this.
Okay.
It is for the first time in my life also crossing my mind that maybe people are eating these crayfish and not I don't really know how crayfish are produced.
Right? They're probably not farmed from, they're probably, are the crayfish that are eaten in the U.S. from the U.S., they're native crayfish, or are
Like
they farmed
eels?
elsewhere?
So we'll just talk about it now because it's really crazy. It's just a short little thing that I have. People absolutely love to eat crayfish, especially in the South in the U.S. And do you want to guess? So they are farmed. Mm-hmm. They are, at least a couple of the farmed species are native species that are farmed here in the U.S. Do you want to guess what state produces
Devil
90?
crayfish. Oh,
Louisiana.
it's Kansas.
Mississippi.
Nicole's losing it. Oh no. Come back to us. Did we jump the gun a little bit? Should we let you finish your question?
One of those states was correct.
Mississippi?
It definitely wasn't Kansas, I'll tell you that.
Not a lot of Cajun restaurants in old Sunflower State.
No. But yeah, 90% of the crayfish eaten in the U.S. are produced in Louisiana.
Okay.
80% of those crayfish that are produced are eaten in Louisiana.
Oh, wow.
Oh my gosh.
Nice, okay.
They love crayfish.
Nice.
It's estimated to be about a $300 million business every single year.
Okay.
And it's estimated to be this is really, really hard to get hard facts on. These numbers are from the people that farm them and the people that are promoting eating them.
Yeah.
For what it's worth, but estimated about 150 million pounds of crayfish are produced each year.
That would add up to so many individual crayfish. Because, how many crayfish must be in a pound? 50?
A lot.
Yeah.
Because there are some crayfish that can get quite large. There's a species in Australia that historically would get up to about 13 pounds.
Dang.
What? In
Wait,
Australia?
hold up. What? Yeah.
31 inches long, 13 pounds.
That is a lobster.
Yeah, that is
so big.
That is alarming.
That is bigger than most lobsters, actually.
Yeah. So that's 80 centimeters or 6 kilograms for non-US folk. Insane.
You said 31 inches long?
Yes, almost 3 feet long.
Oh, that's
Good job.
taller than children.
That is horrifying. Ugh.
Oh no.
Do they? Oh, I know we're getting way off track, like right off the bat.
I mean, we're saying the things I want to say, just not quite in the order I wanted to say them.
Do they dig holes? Like
Most crayfish do dig holes, yes.
even the 3-foot long ones?
I mean, honestly, so the main
Like
reason...
a hobbit. They're as tall as one too.
Oh god. Oh.
Oh my gosh. Okay. The main reason that crayfish dig burrows is for like protection and to help them stay like if they're a burrowing crayfish and they're out of the water, which we'll get to. Because Nicole, why are you talking about crayfish? They don't even live in prairies, but they do.
Oh, yes.
Anyways, the one from Australia, I can't remember the scientific name for it, but it does live like in streams. So the ones that live in streams proper usually are not really big burrowers. Like they can dig, but a lot of times they don't dig very much. So I don't believe that this species digs like hobbit-sized homes in the sides of creeks, because that would be insane.
It's kind of neat though.
It would be pretty neat. But yeah, I don't think they're really big burrowers.
Okay.
Gosh, just amazing stuff.
Yeah. Do you want to guess how small the smallest crayfish are?
Are they tiny?
They're so small.
Could dance on the head of a pin.
Not that small.
Oh, okay.
When they're babies?
When they're babies, perhaps.
Oh.
But the smallest crayfish at adult size are barely an inch long, about 25 millimeters.
Okay.
So like thumbnail sized. Like they're so small.
I mean, yeah, okay. I feel like I've seen a crayfish that size.
It was probably a young one though.
Like a nymph? Is that what you would call it? Mm-hmm. Okay.
Yeah, so the young ones, obviously, they hatch from eggs. They're very, very small. Baby crayfish just look like smaller versions of adult crayfish, which is not always the case with invertebrates. But for crayfish, they are. But yeah.
Okay. I'm still recovering from the thought of like a 3-foot-long lobster bursting out of the ground if I was just like walking around in Australia.
Yeah.
With all the other things they got going on, that is a step too far for me. But
That's what did it for you.
yeah, that's weird. That's really strange.
Yeah.
They also have those big earthworms.
Yeah.
Oh,
the gypslands, something earthworm. I think it's just giant earthworm.
The ones that sing.
Yeah, you can hear them moving underground. They're so big. You just hear them squelching.
Okay.
I can see Alan's skin crawl.
I
from
feel
here.
like, all right, why don't we... I feel like it's our fault that we immediately got you off track. Why don't you tell us, let's zoom out. Let's zoom out and talk about why our listeners should care about the humble crayfish / crawdad / mudbug.
/ yabby /
mud puppy.
mud puppy. There's so many different names for these guys.
Mud puppy.
Yeah, I think that's all the ones I had. Did you say crawdad?
I said crawdad. Okay. I've never heard yabby.
Yeah, so yabbies is Australians call them yabbies.
Oh, I got you. Okay.
Yeah, like even the common names. It's not
Gotcha.
It's not crawfish. Like it's yabby.
Gotcha.
I usually say crayfish. My dad says crawdad. It's usually a lot of it is just regional. Mm-hmm. There's no right or wrong way to call them. Just call them whatever you want to call them. Even looking in the scientific like papers and stuff, crayfish I feel like is the most common one, unless you're looking at Australian species, and they're obviously going to call them yabbies. But like if you search crawfish, crawdad, like all of them come up, no matter what you search. So kind of nice.
Cool. Yeah.
Cool. At least in the papers that I was looking at. I absolutely love crayfish. I think they're super fascinating. They also are very, I don't know, like people think of a crayfish and I feel like they just think of a little brown, gross little thing. But first of all, they can be really tiny and adorable or absolutely gigantic and terrifying. They can also be like brown, dark red, bright red, white, green, blue, spotted, striped, and everything in between. Like they can be a ton of different colors and patterns, and some of them are like legitimately really, really beautiful looking. They do a lot of really cool ecosystem services for us. They have very fascinating life histories, in my opinion. And so I wanted to highlight some of that stuff. I will say, if you fall into the crayfish rabbit hole, like I did.
Why isn't it a crayfish hole?
I'm so
That's
sorry.
a great point,
crayfish
Alan.
burrow.
Thank you.
You're so right. My bad. If you fall down the crayfish burrow, if you look at pre-2017 information, the scientific names will not be accurate. In 2017, there was a huge reshuffling of the scientific names, and they condensed a lot of them and also split a lot of them. So just keep that in mind if you're like looking up stuff about crayfish. It can be really confusing. I'm not going to go into detail, but just keep that in mind. Some like kind of groundwork stuff that I wanted to go over real quick. They are crustaceans, so they're very closely related to lobsters and crabs, but they live only in fresh water, whereas lobsters and crabs are primarily saltwater, though there are some freshwater species. They're what is known as decapods. They have 10 feet. So they have like their big pincher feet, they have some tiny pincher feet, and then they have walking legs. They have 2 body parts, so that sets them apart from insects, which have 3 body parts. I get that question a lot whenever I talk about crayfish or insects, like what sets those guys apart. And their burrows in particular fascinate me, so I wanted to spend some time on that.
When you say 2 body parts, is it like a cephalothorax and a tail?
So insects are head, thorax, abdomen, whereas spiders and decapods are going to be cephalothorax and abdomen.
Okay.
So
Cool.
just those 2 body parts.
Cool.
Yes.
So they're like spiders, but an extra pair of legs.
Yeah. But yeah, they're burrows. They have all sorts of different kinds of burrows, and different species, for the most part, fall into like 3 different types of burrows. But even the same species, depending on different environmental factors, will make different kinds of burrows. It'll make more sense in a second. So the first type of burrower is going to be primary burrowers. These guys use burrowing as their primary form of defense. That's how I remember it.
Okay.
Against drying out, avoiding predators, etc., etc. Their burrows can be very, very complex. Sometimes it's just like a straight burrow down into the ground, like 5 feet, with a little cavity at the bottom where there's water. Sometimes it's a burrow straight down with offshoots and multiple cavities underground. It really just depends on the species, how good the soil is for digging, all that good stuff. And I've read differing opinions on this, so I don't know 100% what is true, because there is usually water in the bottom of these burrows. So at least for a long time, it was thought that they're just digging down until they hit the water table so that they will have water in order to breathe and, stay alive, because they need that, because they have gills. But other sources said that it's not so much that they're reaching the water table, they're really relying on like water runoff just going into their burrows and kind of getting trapped in like the compacted mud that they made down there.
Oh, okay.
So,
yeah,
Interesting.
Okay.
Not sure.
That makes
A little
sense.
Cistern.
Yeah. And what is also kind of interesting is these primary burrows, since they can be so very deep, they will usually have chimneys at the top. So at the entrance, at the soil surface, they will actually build up dirt up and around the entrance. There's a couple different theories as to why they do this. It's not just like, oh, that's the mud and the dirt that they moved, because they're moving way more dirt than what this chimney is holding. The thought is that it increases airflow throughout the rest of the underground burrow.
Okay.
So they need that airflow to help oxygenate the water that's down there, and just to keep it cooled off in the summer, things like that.
That makes sense. Yeah. Okay. I always wondered what the chimneys were there for. Mm-hmm. And this is not related at all. I mean, it is directly related, but it's an anecdote. Uh-huh. But no, I used to whenever I would take kids on hikes, like around a prairie in Texas, you would see these little chimneys all over the place. And like kids would have zero idea what made them every single time. They have and you don't expect it to be like a tiny little crustacean, little baby lobster creature digging holes in the prairie. And so we'd go out and be like, okay, let's look around, like see if we can find any, evidence of what was here. And like you'd almost always find like little dried claws, like little sun bleached, pieces of crayfish shell. And it'd be like, yeah, it was just always really fun to find those because I feel like they're a pretty common sight, and yet a lot of people
Yeah.
don't connect it with what it is.
Yeah, see them
they
here
have
in
no
Kansas
idea.
too. Yeah.
Yeah, and you can literally find them in the middle of the prairie. Like these chimneys and these burrows do not have to be near a source of water. Most species do prefer to be near water or even in water, but there are plenty of species that can be several hundred feet from a water source easily. So yeah, it's pretty incredible that they figured out how to survive in a otherwise waterless landscape.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
And something else interesting, because these burrows are so deep, they can still have really, really low amounts of oxygen in the water, because creatures that breathe through gills are still breathing oxygen. They're just getting it from the water rather than from the air. And crayfish are actually able to sit kind of like at the surface of the water to keep themselves wet, but they're taking in oxygen from the air, kind of like how
Okay.
a lot of like labyrinthine fish will do, where they kind of like gulp air. So pretty cool.
Interesting. Do you think that's analogous to like roly-polies and other isopods like that are still breathing their gills, breathing through moist gills in the air, technically? Like,
I believe so, yeah. It's at least a very similar process. Yeah.
yeah.
Ooh, crayfish they actually pump water from their tail up across their gills and exit up near their mouth. Like they actively will pump water through their gills, and they can reverse the direction of flow to like clean out their gills if they get gunky. Kind of cool.
Gosh,
I just found that out.
It's kind of like, oh, never mind. I was gonna say it's like vomiting, but
No.
out their
well,
butt.
I mean,
Well, it's only going through their gills.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
Like gill vomit. I'm sorry. Never
yeah.
mind.
No, it's fine.
And if you didn't know, so crayfish, their gills are like on the sides. Like there's really disturbing videos of people like taking parasites off of like saltwater shrimp. Where
Oh,
they,
I've
like,
Oh,
seen
yeah.
those.
I don't like it, but you
Big
can.
fan of those.
Yeah, you can like lift up the side of their carapace, and like that's where their gills are. But yeah, so that's primary burrowers.
oh, right.
That's
okay.
what we were talking about. Yep. Uh-huh.
Primary burrowers, their primary mode of defense is burrowing. They make a lot of burrows. Secondary burrowers do burrow most often, but they will be near streams. They even sometimes will build their burrows like into the side of stream banks. Tertiary burrowers may or may not burrow. A lot of times they just hang out underneath rocks. If you flip a rock in a stream and you find a burrow, or if you flip a rock in a stream and you find a crayfish, it's probably a tertiary burrower. It probably pretty much never burrows. It might make like an indention in the bottom of the stream, but that's pretty much it.
Wait, so
Okay.
what is a tertiary burrow? I don't understand.
Well, they don't hardly ever burrow.
But it's not a burrow then.
It's a tertiary. It's a classification of crayfish.
Yeah. So you have like your number one top burrowers.
Yeah.
Okay.
You have your sort of good burrowers, and you have your don't even really try that hard burrowers.
Okay. This is like
Yeah.
specifically a crayfish classification.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Right.
Yes.
Is this like taxonomic or is it just behavioral?
So a lot of the primary burrowers are related. So they're going to be the ones that are way far away from a stream. They also tend to be much smaller than the ones that are living in the streams. Not always, but those primary burrowers, a lot of them are related, and a lot of them do look morphologically very similar as well. But there is some overlap, especially between like the secondary and tertiaries. And some tertiary species do actually burrow. But again, it's not going to be really complex burrows. They might dig like 6 inches down and like have a little cavity down there. It's nothing too crazy.
And that's secondary.
Tertiary.
Oh my god.
They don't try. The tertiaries don't. It's like
They don't try.
good effort, but not a great burrow.
Yeah, like that's a scrape. It's not a nest.
Yes.
That type of. We're putting it into bird language here for
There
you.
we go.
Okay.
I have some bird stuff later.
What?
Mm-hmm.
Because they eat them. No,
For
because of
sure.
other reasons.
Because of other reasons.
Okay. I mean, they do eat. Never mind. Okay. Anyway.
Yeah, they do.
I don't know why. I remember one time we spent a really long time with you trying to explain that. Like, we've already had this conversation outside of the podcast because you wanted me to make a graphic at one point, and I was like, I don't understand. I still don't understand.
We're getting
Okay.
there.
Yeah,
We're getting closer.
primary source of defense is burrowing.
Yep,
They're
yep,
number
yep.
one. Secondary, second best. Tertiary, third best.
Yeah, but like, what does second best look like?
Not very good.
Yeah, they're
But,
less
like,
impressive.
better.
Yeah, better than the tertiary.
Oh,
for
better
sure.
than those tertiary idiots, for sure.
Do primary burrowers have like tunnel systems?
Sometimes, yeah.
But they don't have to.
Not always.
Okay. I don't like how wishy-washy this classification feels.
I'm sorry.
So the main defense for tertiary burrowers then would be the cool crawfish thing where they go and like go backwards.
He just bent himself into like a sea, like a shrimp. Going
They do that thing, you know what I mean?
Yeah, it's called a tail flip.
A tail flip. Yeah, I love that. That's
it's
great.
great.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Then they just like bam, blast, like hit the rocket boosters, blast backwards from whatever's trying to get me.
Yes. 100%.
I love that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And a lot of the poor burrowers, we'll just erase tertiary. A lot of the poor
no,
burrowers.
keep using it. It'll make it make more sense.
Okay. A lot of the tertiary crayfish have very like long pinchers. They have very long claws. And so they just can't burrow because they don't have very good burrowing claws.
Okay.
But those are great for defense and great for like reaching under rocks to like get food and like fish stuff
Right.
out.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Aw, because they don't have a burrow.
Yeah.
But other crayfish also need to reach under rocks to get food and stuff. So why don't they have claws? I don't understand
They
how
all
this is
have
related to
claws.
being tertiary.
We might just have
These
to
are
power.
just these are vague classifications that people use. It's very common in crayfish world, so I feel like it should be covered. It's
Yeah,
not
that's
that
fine.
important.
No,
It's okay.
no. It's good to know.
I
feel like a crayfish scientist now.
You
Yeah, we should normalize crayfish language.
Not that many people know about primary, secondary, and tertiary burrows.
No,
so-
probably mostly this guy right here.
I mean, probably, yeah. That guy and there's another guy, Horton Hobbs, rest in peace. He was known as Old Man Crayfish. Like 90% of the crayfish literature cites this guy.
Wow.
That's awesome.
Yeah, he discovered 168 species of crayfish.
Oh, dang.
Sorry, what?
Described 168 species of crayfish.
Yeah. That's so incredible.
Yeah.
Imagine having your life's work culminate in like being able to be called Old Man Crayfish.
Old man crayfish.
Like that
Yeah,
is
I love it.
so good.
I love it.
it's amazing.
Another big influence on me and my love of crayfish was Dr. Zach Lauman of the Lauman Lab in West Virginia. You can find them on Facebook.
Okay.
It's Crayfish Conservation Laboratory. It's just a bunch of big old nerds digging in the mud, and it's just amazing, and I love it so much.
Aw.
But yeah, so just had to get that shout out real quick. So those are the different kinds of crayfish. I want to highlight 2 species. One is the prairie crayfish. Guess where they live?
The prairies. I've heard of them before.
Yeah, they're also sometimes called just grassland crayfish.
Aw.
So yeah.
What?
I forgot I had this in there. I have a quote from the Illinois Department of Natural Resources, who also had a pretty good crayfish page on their website.
Okay.
Kudos. Under prairie crayfish, I found this quote. The prairie crayfish dig burrows in low, poorly drained land that is covered with grasses or other prairie plants.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
Since so little prairie remains in the state today, this crayfish is most often found near ditches.
Oh no. Oh no. That was in Illinois?
Yeah.
Illinois
sad.
has some prairie.
Not a lot.
much. Yeah, you're right. Okay.
They have like 1% remaining.
God, that's so sad.
They got ditches though.
They do have ditches. Crayfish love ditches.
I bet.
So do rails.
Yeah.
I'm sorry for trying to make it about birds. I'm just trying to get excited
Do
about
rails love
crayfish.
crayfish?
Or I don't know.
A lot of birds love crayfish.
Probably.
Nice.
There have been over 200 different species of animals directly related to eating crayfish.
Whoa.
And I'm sure that number is much higher than that. But these were specifically like prairie species. So
Are these like are they abundant or significant enough to have like a sort of a keystone effect in a wetland or like in a grassland?
yes, so they are considered ecosystem engineers,
my
much
God.
like a prairie dog or a beaver. They do a lot of good for their environment. Yes,
Cool.
and I will go into more detail in a moment.
They're like
Ooh.
prairie dogs with
can't
extra
wait.
legs.
Sure.
Do they bark?
Good question.
Okay, so I didn't read it because I had about 30 tabs open and I lost it, but I found a paper suggesting that crayfish make noises, but I didn't actually read it.
What?
And now I'm regretting it.
Wait,
so,
what?
Apologies.
Okay. Do you think it was, I mean, from your glimpse that you got, do you think it was more of like a, we make vibrations sort of thing? Or was it like a, you know?
Like a stridulation.
I imagine it's more stridulation. I have picked up crayfish and they go like, because they're like blowing bubbles.
Sorry. That's just right in my ear, that sound. Okay. All right, let's keep going.
You're welcome. But yeah, so I have heard them like blow bubbles at me, but like you can't do that if you're underwater. So
True.
I don't know. There's a lot of stuff to read. But yeah, the prairie crayfish is pretty common throughout its range. It does primarily live in prairies. There's another crayfish species that was specifically noted on the Missouri conservation page called the devil crayfish, which you started to mention, Rachel.
Yeah.
Also very, very abundant. It's one of the widest spread species of crayfish, like in the U.S. So they do live in grasslands, but they also will take advantage of other habitats, which I thought was interesting. The devil crayfish is a really fantastic burrower, which is why I wanted to mention it. Their burrows can be up to 15 feet in length.
Wow.
Dang.
And these aren't very big crayfish. I think the devil crayfish is like 4 or 5 inches. It's not a really big one. So it's a big burrow for a little guy.
Yeah, that's
Okay.
a lot.
Huh.
In comparison, the prairie crayfish is about 2 or 3 inches long, and their burrows are only about 6 feet long. So still pretty impressive for such a little guy, but quite a bit smaller. The burrowing crayfish have really different lifestyles depending on the species. Yes, they all dig pretty impressive burrows. Yes, they all live fairly far from like bodies of water, or at least permanent bodies of water. But like the prairie crayfish, usually there's like a breeding pair inside, and really once their babies grow up, they kick them out. But then there's other species that like you'll have several generations in the same burrow, just like all hanging out together.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
Interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
I'm surprised to hear that they're rearing their young inside these burrows. For some reason, I imagined that they must go back to some water source in order to breed.
Some of them will. So crayfish reproduction is really kind of interesting, and this is where bird stuff comes in, so get excited.
What? Yeah.
So
okay, let's
just wait. So crayfish will go through 2 molts a year, like a lot of birds, and they molt into a reproductive form, like birds molt into like breeding plumage, and then they will molt out of that reproductive form, kind of like a bird molts out of their breeding plumage. So, but with crayfish, they cannot mate unless they're in that reproductive form.
What?
Yeah, because they physically change when they're in that other form. And the males, they have these their very first like swimmerette on their tail are called gonopods. And it is what they use to transfer sperm to the female. But yeah, and when they aren't in that reproductive form, they don't have any interest in like mate guarding. They literally cannot reproduce, which is very strange, but it
Yeah.
works for them.
Just like the way things are articulated on their exoskeleton is like different
Yes.
completely.
Do they just not have the gonopods?
They still have the gonopods, but I don't know how to describe it in any way that's any kind of PG, but the non-reproductive gonopods are like
She's thinking so hard.
they're like club-like.
Okay.
Whereas like the reproductive gonopods are like finger-like, so they can reach inside. Yeah.
Okay. That feels so unnecessary. That's so interesting that they would do that every single year.
And there's a lot of, so when you're trying to like key out crayfish, there's a lot of crayfish and a lot of them look very similar. And a lot of times it comes down to looking at the gonopods, but you have to look at a reproductive male gonopod in order to identify a species. So people usually, if you're trying to figure out like what kind of crayfish are in an area, you survey either in late fall or even in winter when they're in their reproductive form. In the summer, they're not in their reproductive forms, and it's possible that you will get animals that you cannot identify as species.
Oh my gosh, this is insane. Oh, I did not. That's so different from anything else I've heard of.
Mm-hmm. It's wild.
That is pretty crazy. I mean, people who study invertebrates are something else.
Yeah.
Like, looking at, gonads under a microscope to try and figure out what is what. That's just that's
next level.
It's commitment. It is.
Yeah,
it's next level.
Yeah.
They can live multiple years, right? So
Yes.
this is like something they are actually transitioning in and out of.
Yes.
Okay. Wow.
Mm-hmm.
Just making sure.
Mm-hmm. In general, the crayfish life cycle is born early spring, sometimes even like late winter. Like there have been, like at least the females will have eggs, like sometimes as early as like in January. So when it's still very, very cold out, especially on like a prairie. But the young usually will hatch early spring. They mature throughout the summer. Some species will change into the reproductive form that fall, but some it's not until they're over a year old, and it's not until the following fall that they become reproductively mature, which is extremely slow for an invertebrate.
Yeah. Wow.
So, yeah, and crayfish in the wild live like 2-3 years because so many things eat them.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a really long time to mature, to only live like another 6 months if you're lucky. But yeah, they do their mating in the fall, and the females will wait until it at least warms up a little bit before she, has her eggs and raises her young. So
Okay.
yeah, so especially with like the females, so they molt in the fall, mate. The females a lot of times will molt in the spring later than the males because she's carrying eggs or she's carrying young.
Okay.
And it's that spring molt that brings them into their non-reproductive phase. And the females do, like you said, like they actually show pretty consistent parental care throughout the species. She holds onto her eggs under her tail using like this nasty sticky substance called glare.
Don't call it nasty.
It's kind of nasty, glare. But you can see whenever a female, like if you go out in like January, February, and you catch crayfish, you can tell females that are gravid have eggs because she'll have glare on her tail. And it's like a pale white substance.
Yeah, cool. Okay.
So, and then she will lay her eggs, stick them to that glare, and kind of like curl her tail around them to protect them. And she takes care, like she keeps the babies around for sometimes a few months, depending on the species, until they get big enough that like they're annoying her, and then she starts eating them sometimes.
Oh my God.
We can't be perfect forever.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean,
That's why you have a lot, in case you get hungry.
yeah. Well, funny thing there though is that some species will have like 1,000 babies, but there are several species that have like maybe a couple dozen. I've seen several that listed 20 to 30 young, and that's it every year.
That is so
because it's just one
strange.
brood a year too. Also,
That is very contrary to what you think of just in like invertebrate reproduction in general. You always think of them as being like R-selected, like I'm gonna have 100,000 offspring and maybe 2 of them will live, but that's all I need. Like just playing the odds. So it's very weird to think of like a crayfish having a couple dozen. That's not a lot.
No.
That's very small.
But
especially since they only have one like clutch a year. So
Yeah.
And they take over a year to mature in some species.
Yeah.
So it's like that is completely contrary to what you'd think it would their life cycle would be like.
Yeah. They do have a lot of parental care though, so I feel like that does kind of make sense. The discrepancy within crayfish is what's throwing me, but it's like, okay, I can see why maybe if you're like taking very good care of them, you could get away with like 20 to 30 as your reproductive strategy and stuff.
Yeah. And we mentioned, like Rachel mentioned, some you'd expect crayfish to like go to a source of water to lay her eggs and raise her young, and some will do that, but there are some that just raise them in their burrows. It just depends. There's so many different species of crayfish, and they all have such different lifestyles that it's really hard to make generalizations about them. So.
Okay.
Fascinating. I had a question before you move
Yes.
on. And that was because you were mentioning that they have some species will have these like multi-generational kind of colonies going in these burrow systems.
Yes.
So what is that burrow system, like the burrowing network? What kind of ecosystem like develops within it? You know, like what are they eating? How are they surviving? You know, like how does that work?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. So there are a lot of different species of especially like insects that have been known to heavily rely on crayfish burrows as a safe haven. So there are some insects that will actually raise their young in there. So there's a species of endangered dragonfly that like very commonly will actually like raise their nymphs inside of crayfish burrows. There is a chance that the crayfish might eat them, but there's also a lot of other things that they're eating. So the safety of the burrow outweighs the risk of the crayfish eating her young. So she chooses to raise her young there.
Interesting. They are omnivores, right?
Yes.
Crayfish. Okay.
Yeah, so they do eat a lot of plant matter. One of their things that they do for their ecosystem is also just they're detritivores, so they eat a lot of like dead stuff, and they're really important in that way. They clean up not just dead plant matter, but actually dead like corpses. There's one species of crayfish that has been heavily cited on human corpses, even.
What?
Yeah.
Fascinating.
So, yeah, they eat pretty much anything they can find. And like I had a pet crayfish one time. I honestly don't recommend it. Because if you have any plants in there, I hope they're cheap because that crayfish is going to mow it all down and eat all of it. Aww. Even if you feed her a ridiculous amount of food and she ate all of her siblings. So...
Yeah, I love this. How this got so personal.
It's a good PSA, though.
Yeah. They're really cool, and they can make really cool pets. Fairly low maintenance, but yeah. Make sure you don't release them when you're done with them, also, because that's how you get invasive species. Between people releasing their pets into the wild and specifically like bait shops, and people releasing their bait after they're done with them.
Yeah.
It sounds cruel, but it is better for the environment and probably better for that crayfish if you euthanize them, if you don't use all your bait, if you're buying bait, live bait. Yeah. That's also why a lot of places just straight up don't allow live bait, is because of these introduced species like crayfish.
That makes sense.
The rusty crayfish is the really gnarly one.
Yeah. In the U.S. The virile crayfish and the rusty crayfish are two really big ones in the U.S. Both are found in Kansas. The virile crayfish, or the northern crayfish, which is easier to say, does technically its native range like dips into Kansas, but it's found like all over Kansas where it shouldn't be. And the rusty crayfish was just found in Kansas just a few years ago for the first time. So, yeah. In Europe, go ahead.
Oh, so they are North American species.
They are.
But they're like native invasives, but they're not, they have they're expanding their range artificially within the U.S.
Yes. Yeah, it's primarily humans moving them. It's not just like their range expanding because of climate change or whatever.
Gotcha.
So,
Okay.
yeah.
The rusty crayfish isn't native to this area.
It's not native to here at all. No.
Yeah.
It's native, I think it's the Northeast somewhere-ish. Great
They
Lakes.
do like a weird clonal reproductive thing that makes them really good at spreading around.
Oh, okay.
And I think they're one of the ones that have like 1,000 babies. I know the northern crayfish has a ton of young, and I believe that the rusty does as well. So, yeah.
Let's go back to happy thing.
Okay. Well, maybe we'll skip that part if we want to do happy stuff.
No,
Okay.
tell us sad things. We can get all the sad stuff over
We can
with
handle
right
some
now.
sad stuff.
Okay.
Can't we?
I mean, it's not sad. It's interesting, and then it gets weird, and then it gets kind of dark, and then it gets...
Okay, I'm sold. Let's go.
Okay.
Sounds like a roller coaster.
Take this journey. Let's go.
Okay. Crayfish brains.
Okay.
They're really, really weird, and there's been a lot of really messed up scientific stuff that people have done to them, especially in like the 80s and 70s, but into the 2000s as well. Crayfish, like insects, don't have like brains as we think of them. They're really a bundle of nerves called ganglion, and they have little ganglia nerve clusters throughout their bodies. This is really helpful, which is not something we talked about, I don't think, but it's helpful because having these little nerve centers kind of spread out means that they have wicked fast reflexes. If you've ever tried to like slap a fly, it's almost impossible just because they react so fast. Same with crayfish and a lot of other animals. There's some really weird experiments on like insects in particular where they like damage like one ganglia just to see what happens.
Aww.
The answer is it's kind of messed up, and it turns out that yes, indeed, the ganglia next to the arm controls the arm. Who would have guessed?
Wow.
Yeah,
Okay.
so I don't really want to go into detail in it because it honestly makes my stomach kind of hurt. But there's some really interesting praying mantis ones if you want to look that up. It's dark, though, in my opinion.
That doesn't seem like the kind of experiment people would still be doing in the 2000s. You know what I mean?
I can see people doing it to insects, though, but in a way that,
Yeah.
like, probably in the future we'll look back on it the same way we look back at some of the horrific things we've done to dogs and chimpanzees and stuff. Yeah.
Because we know bumblebees feel emotion.
I was going to ask if crayfish did, but I didn't really want to open that can of worms.
I know that other crustaceans, pain receptors have been identified in other crustaceans.
Yes.
Yeah.
Is that the case with crayfish as far as I know?
Yes, and there's actually a really interesting study that recently came out about anxiety in crayfish.
Oh,
Oh,
no.
no. This is going to ruin crayfish boils.
Good.
Yeah.
Yeah, good.
I mean, I feel like I've heard stuff, against boiling crustaceans alive in general a lot recently, but
I believe this came out in 2014. But what they did, again, a little messed up, but the crayfish were exposed to unpleasant electric fields, and afterward were found to have really high levels of serotonin, which in humans is a chemical that we release to counteract stress. These stressed crayfish were given the option of a tank that was dark or lit, and the crayfish that were stressed would avoid the lit areas entirely because when they were shocked, it was when they were in lit areas. So they would purposefully avoid the areas that looked similar to the place where they previously got shocked. Whereas control crayfish would just kind of wander around freely, didn't seem to have a preference for dark or lit areas.
Okay.
The stressed crayfish were given anti-anxiety meds and afterwards would wander the tank freely because their anxiety had been reduced.
oh.
They were literally given benzos.
Fascinating.
So anxiety exists and is treatable in crayfish.
Yeah.
And responds to the same treatment that humans respond to.
Yeah.
Okay,
Oh,
now
no.
this is making me wonder now. Does pharmaceutical runoff in stream systems then have an effect on crayfish?
Oh, it
Because
has
if they're
to.
like
Oh,
if they're
sure.
like getting antidepressants from the water, then what if they're like, they're just going around like stress free and their like survival instinct is compromised?
Ooh, yeah, and they're just getting nabbed because they're just wandering around in the middle of the stream instead of taking cover.
Whoa.
Because anxiety can be helpful, especially if you're a very tasty little crayfish.
For
Yeah, it does
sure,
exist
yeah.
for a reason.
Yeah.
Exactly.
My
Fascinating.
therapist likes to remind me that.
Fascinating.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Whoa.
How much Valium does it take to kill a crayfish?
Probably not a lot.
Okay, I was gonna say that's a pretty powerful drug right there.
Yeah.
Okay.
Huh.
Huh.
Yeah, it's very low doses. So I found a paper that like summarized a bunch of other really weird things that we've done to crayfish for science.
Okay.
It's gonna be really quick. It's gonna be really quick.
with
All right,
them.
all right.
Okay.
So crayfish not only do anti-anxiety meds work on them, in very similar ways that they work for humans. So does cocaine, amphetamine, morphine, meth, opioids. All of these things have been given to crayfish.
Okay.
And they reacted in very similar ways as humans do.
That is actually good information to have because we
is.
can't assume
Yeah.
that their brains work the same or similar enough to our brains that those chemicals would even have like a similar place to land in their brains.
Amazing.
And it also, like, they have used this in the past to study like things like alcohol addiction and opioid addiction and things like that, and use them not quite as human analogs, but because I mean they do still process it differently than we do, but it's brought up like this other human analog for these kinds of studies. So interesting. One quote that I found was, when administered to crayfish, cocaine elicited rapid backwards walking, exaggerated waving of claws as if attempting to defend against imaginary attacks from above, and a series of tail flips. They just freak out. They cannot handle it.
Yeah, okay, that's fair.
I can picture
That's
the
fair.
crayfish with his little arms.
Yeah, just freaking out.
Swatting at things that aren't there.
Yeah, isn't that's so weird?
It's interesting.
Yeah.
You're gonna do a bunch of cocaine and then fight a heron.
Yeah.
That's what they're feeling like.
Yeah.
Bring it on!
They also found that like if you kept giving them cocaine, like after several days of giving cocaine to crayfish, those really dramatic like reactions stop. Like they build up a resistance to it, and it just becomes more of like a mild stimulant, which just made them pace around a lot. Yeah.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's wild.
Thank you for this information,
You're
Nicole.
so welcome.
I'm gonna file it into weird things my brain now
Yeah,
knows.
this is good. This is good. Good job, science. Good job.
Morphine decreased activity a lot too.
How do researchers
gee,
get a
I
hold of
wonder.
the drugs for these studies?
That's a
I
great
don't know.
question. How do you how do you write a grant proposal? It's like, okay, so
I need cocaine.
I need a lot of cocaine. I'm going to be
that
administering it
That's
to.
true, not that much.
Well, that's true.
Yeah, they're
It's
very
suspicious if you ask for a lot.
Small.
It was
Yeah,
probably fun that maybe we could find out just for fun.
yeah.
Amazing.
Yeah. And the crayfish were found to become drug seeking.
Okay.
Yeah.
Like they would actively seek it out and like perform tasks to get it administered to them.
That's actually pretty intense too. Like it's a level of training too,
Yeah.
and exhibiting like
Learning and
what does this mean? Like what is
they're
Rachel,
much
that's a
more
great
advanced.
question.
I don't really know, but they are much more advanced than we give them credit for. Kind of like bumblebees was the
Yeah.
only connection that I was going to make.
which ganglia are the drug craving ones?
The head. They were administered into the head.
Okay.
In front of the ganglia.
Do you think their arms can also become drug craving?
I don't know.
I'm just so I don't know. This
What
is
about their tail ganglia? What if their tails can start?
don't know, man.
Like, I don't understand ganglia.
Crayfish can become drug addicts. I found that really fascinating. There was a lot more notes on that, but we voted ahead of time to not
Is there
go into
anything
that
that
too much.
can't become a drug addict?
Well, isn't that the question? Because we always think about like mammals and stuff, or like birds getting drunk on like rotten berries, and like panthers
alcoholics.
licking psychedelic moss and stuff. Like, but I don't know. It's weird to me that inverts can too.
It is, yeah. Strange.
And like these are really old studies that I just had never heard of. Anyways,
How do we get back on track from
Dude,
this? How do we recover?
I don't know where the
How did we get
where
here?
the trail even was at this point. We started out with like etouffee, and then we went into burrows, and then we went into crayfish torture for a little bit. Then like crayfish drug use, which sounded kind of fun.
Nicole, do you like crayfish?
Like what's going
crayfish.
I don't even know where we are anymore.
I just want to talk about how they are ecosystem engineers. We touched on it a little bit, but let's go more in depth.
Yes, yeah, we
Okay.
did. So we talked about the dragonflies that
Yes.
so their burrows become habitat for
Yes.
other creatures.
Yes.
Okay.
I have a perhaps like very stupid basic question about what crayfish are doing out there, which is like basically what are they doing out there?
Yeah.
And
what are they doing?
By which
all
I
the
mean
time?
like are they like popping out of their burrow and like grabbing crickets, or are they like getting roots that are inside their burrow? Or are they just like waiting for stuff to just fall down their chimney and just eating whatever like glimpses of the world above just happen to fall into their 15-foot depths below. Like, what are they doing?
If they're eating, like, are they eating detritus that gets washed down into the burrow? Like,
they
from, like,
will.
overland water flow?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but they also, so a lot of the, like, burrowing crayfish, the ones that are, like, in prairies, they are active at night. They will come out of their burrows at night to feed.
They come out of their burrows to feed?
Mm-hmm.
And they go out at night?
Yeah.
Oh my God. They're sleeping all day. and partying all night. Aw. Yeah. That's really cool. Okay,
Yeah.
cool.
But then there's also been species that's not true, and they're just active all the time.
Yeah, that's
and
fair.
It's just because no one's looking at them and nobody knows what they're doing.
That's fair.
Yeah.
No one knows.
Yeah. But the best way to catch crayfish is to go out at night and you can spotlight for them.
No way. They have eye shine?
Oh, no. Oh, cool. Okay.
You can also just get, like, a piece of corn on, like, a fishing rod and just, like, drop it down in the burrow, and they'll grab onto it, and because they're stubborn, they will not let go. And you can just pull them out.
This is delightful.
Nice.
Or, which is a way that a lot of people do, especially the crazy crayfish people, you can just stick your arm down that burrow and just dig them out. But you are destroying the burrow when you do that. So
How long does it take him to dig a new one?
it depends on the species. So there are some species, one of their big impacts on the environment is that there are some species like the red swamp crayfish is an extremely active burrower, and especially in, like, England, where they are invasive. They're a U.S. native, but they are invasive in England. Guess how they got over there. And because they burrow so much, they are causing really big problems in agricultural fields, especially, like, rice fields.
Oh.
As well as, like, horrible stream bank destabilization.
Oh, wow. Okay,
Yeah.
yeah, I can see why that would... Yeah,
Huh.
okay.
Yeah. There's a really cool paper that I read specifically about the red swamp crayfish in, I think, France, where they were looking at how often they dig, and because of the soil composition of this particular river, it's really, really sandy and, like, gritty, and so it makes it easy to dig in, but it also makes the burrows very prone to collapsing. They just don't hold very well.
Mm-hmm.
So the crayfish will dig a burrow, come out, feed, walk around a little bit, and instead of going back to the old burrow like most crayfish do, it just digs a new burrow because it's so easy to dig a new one. So why not?
No.
So now this one crayfish has, like, 30 burrows within a couple weeks, and it's not just that one crayfish there. It's like a few hundred or a few thousand.
Right.
So it's really bad.
It's a really gnarly
It's gotta-
impact.
Yeah.
Really affect the drainage and stuff, and the integrity of the soil, I guess.
Yeah, it's a really big problem.
Crazy.
And you wouldn't think that a little tiny crayfish could do all that destruction, but yeah, it's pretty gnarly. I found another paper that was published in 2020, which is more recent than that one, that actually looked at herbicides and their effect on crayfish. And they found that in the red swamp crayfish, when they were exposed to herbicides, their digging activity levels increased.
Oh, no.
So
Why?
it's hard to say. They assume, because it was a fairly small sample size, and this is, I think, one of the first studies to look at this specifically. So they weren't making, like, too many crazy leaps, but their hypothesis was just that the crayfish were stressed, and that stress caused them to dig more to, like, try to fix that stress, because what else are you going to do if you're a crayfish?
Oh.
So it's possible that, you know, especially when you're thinking about agricultural fields and streams inside of cities, which that one study in France was in the city, there's a lot of runoff of a bunch of different chemicals happening. So these crayfish are stressed and they're digging more and causing even more damage than they would already be doing. Is a possibility. What's really weird, though, about this second study is one of the two herbicides that they tested is actually approved for aquatic use, and is used primarily to control, like, algae and bacteria. So,
Okay.
yeah. But it stresses the crap out of crayfish, and then they dig a whole bunch. So, love that.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I feel the like urge bubbling up from within me to complain about regulations and the people that like are motivated to make them and why they're motivated to make regulations the way they do, and
money.
You're right.
We know it.
Not the time.
It's not the time.
It's not the time or the place. Not when we're trying to get a sponsorship from Big Herbicide.
Yep, that's us.
That's totally us.
That's some of the negative effects that they have on the environment. But there's a lot of good that they do. We already mentioned that like hundreds of species of animals eat them, from birds to raccoons to foxes and fish and so many things. They're just very tasty. Lots of things eat them.
Yeah.
And like I said, they are considered ecosystem engineers. They're very important decomposers. But all their burrowing also is really, really good for especially the prairies that they live in. They are moving around nutrients in the soil. They're aerating the soil. And they also help bring that water like deep underground. Healthy dirt means healthy plants, which means healthy ecosystem. Good job, crayfish. I found a stat on the Missouri Department of Conservation's website, which did not have any kind of citation associated with it.
Missouri Department of Conservation.
I know. I've been.
Is this that one thing you told me last year that is completely insane?
Yeah, there's two of them.
Okay.
Yeah, there's two.
All right,
There's two.
all right. Get ready
The
for
first
this.
one,
Who can we call to?
the
You know
guy,
someone?
the guy that wanted shirts from us works for Missouri Department of Wildlife.
Oh, we should tell him that we have shirts now, and also ask him for
Citations.
Yeah. Who do you know? Go shake down some officials for us.
Hey, your shirt's here. Also, how dare you?
Yeah, I'll give you a free shirt if you tell me the citation for this outrageous fact.
Yes.
Give us the personal cell phone number of whoever was responsible for putting this on the website.
Yes.
So we can ask them. We're not trying to do bad things. We're just
No,
trying
no.
to get the source of
Yeah.
information.
Trying to get into
Yeah.
the truth.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And what's this insane fact, Nicole?
Okay, fact number one.
Is it a fact?
I don't know.
Okay.
This is a direct quote. One burrowing crayfish species, doesn't even say what species.
Okay.
One burrowing crayfish species that was studied brought over 7 tons of soil per acre per year to the surface, mixing the entire soil surface in a 3-year period.
One individual crayfish?
I'm assuming they mean all of the crayfish in that acre, but it's very unclear.
That would be a good thing to put some more clear numbers to, because that's
In like a
fascinating.
species. Yeah.
Yeah, 7 tons of
Dirt.
per what unit, per what
7
quantity of
tons of
crayfish.
7 tons of soil per acre per year.
That's crazy. That's a lot. Yeah, that's a lot of turnover.
And one crayfish?
I doubt it's one crayfish.
They said one burrowing crayfish.
One burrowing crayfish species.
So that's not even including the other burrowing crayfish species that are there.
Yeah.
That's true.
Yeah. I wish they at least said what species so that I could attempt to find a citation, but
And
they
if
did
it
not.
was, on
And
cocaine or not.
Maybe it was. Maybe that's the answer.
Right.
I have heard that like crayfish move literal tons of dirt, but I've never seen 7 specifically cited.
Or like that acre parameter.
Yeah. So it's like there is some truth there somewhere. They do move a lot of soil.
Some verifiable truth. you mean.
Yes, yeah. I just don't know the exact numbers or the species or any of that stuff. So,
Okay.
fascinating. Might
It
be true.
is,
Hey, what's that
yeah.
guy's name?
I don't remember.
Okay.
I can look in an email.
Never mind. I was going to shout him out, but what?
Yeah, I mean, I have his email. I can pull it up.
So like, when you're thinking like those little balls of clay that they make the chimneys out of,
Yeah.
so like 7 tons worth of that over a year.
Oh my god, that's really cool.
It's neat.
Look at him go.
Nicole,
Yes.
if you would, please give me the absolute most insane, probably untrue crayfish fact that you have that has been published by a state conservation organization.
Okay. Are you ready?
I am.
Yeah.
Okay. On a different page. I don't remember what page. I didn't write it down. Quote. Crayfish are the largest and most common invertebrates in Missouri.
What?
Did they mean invertebrates? That sounds so wrong.
That can't be true. That's 100% not true.
There's so many mosquitoes in Missouri.
I know.
Bed bugs are probably more common than crayfish. What?
The largest of anything is never the most common.
And they went on to clarify.
So many midges.
They
clarified.
They clarified. There's a clarification here. Are you ready? There can be more than 20 per square meter of water.
That many.
There's not that many.
There's not that much water in Missouri. I mean, there is water in Missouri. Are they counting in caves?
Oh my
That
god.
shouldn't matter.
There is probably more invertebrates living like on the crayfish in the burrow than 20 per square meter. What is happening?
And that's the thing. Like, it wasn't just like a slip of the tongue. They meant like macroinvertebrates. Macroinvertebrates. So we're
Sure.
specifically talking about like water bug creatures, because that's not true either. There's so many beetles that are extremely prolific. There's freaking dragonfly nymphs and like scuds and like so many things that live in the water.
Yeah, what category would make that even make sense?
It's hard. The mind is reeling right now. I don't. I really feel
What if
like
they
I
meant-
would like an explanation from somebody.
yeah.
It's the person behind that stat. I don't know who. I would like a little clarification. I think we deserve that.
I think we do
as
too.
crayfish enthusiasts.
Can we call somebody like
Should I call
on the
that guy?
podcast?
I don't know if we're gonna get somebody on the phone right now, but yeah.
The largest and most common invertebrates in Missouri. Crayfish.
Truly wild.
We shall see. But Nicole, regardless of whether or not that last bit of nonsense is even remotely grounded in reality, I have learned a lot today.
I'm glad.
This has been a real interesting. I've come to a new appreciation of crayfish.
So glad.
Yeah.
Well, thank you guys for listening to this episode of The Best Biome, which is produced through our nonprofit Grassland Groupies, dedicated to inspiring the conservation of grasslands. In the show notes, you can find our website and all of our contact info and social media accounts. Nicole will post her primary sources in the notes too, so you can find those there. Get in touch with us if you enjoyed the show. And if you want to support us, tell your friends about us or leave us a review on Podchaser or Apple Podcasts. We could not do this without your support. We'll see you again in a couple of weeks.
Bye.
Toodles.
Toodles. Go catch a crayfish.